In 1998, Danny, Ethan, Mary, Louisa, and Sue had heard of an old movie theater. It had closed down due to its failure to sell enough tickets to keep it running, and a terrible gas leak that ended the lives of 50 moviegoers that attended the theater that very afternoon, forcing the Cinemania to close its doors once and for all. However, since 1995, 1 year after the theater closed its doors for good, rumors began to circulate of the Cinemania having random grand reopenings, only for people to be disappointed that the place was still closed down. People spoke highly of the great times they had when they would go to see their favorite movies for $5, $10 if you included the unlimited snacks and refills. Some people, however, spoke negatively of the place, as they said it was a literal death trap, and how it didn't kill anyone sooner was a mystery in its own right. From the popcorn machine catching fire from time to time, to the weird smell that sometimes lingered in the bathrooms or room number 5. Either way, it was Ethan McAllister that brought it up to his friends. The conversation had been dying down, and it seemed that all Ethan was trying to do was creep out his friends by bringing up the old theater.
You know, guys,
Ethan started the conversation back up.
I heard the rumors are circulating again.
What rumors?
Danny asked curiously, followed by the others wanting Ethan to continue his train of thought.
The Cinemania downtown is having a grand reopening.
At this, the girls laughed, rolled their eyes, and mocked what Ethan had said. Danny hadn't laughed, but scratched his head in confusion. Among the group, it seemed that Danny really had never heard of the story of the Cinemania, and Mary was the first among them to point it out.
Danny, you've heard of the Cinemania, haven't you?
Not really.
Danny replied as he put his hands in his pockets, unsure of what story his friends were about to spin.
No way! Are you fucking serious?
Said Mary, as she started lighting a cigarette.
Danny, even you have to have heard of the Cinemania. It was one of the biggest hangout places in the Bronx. Though, now the Whitestone movie theater took that title from it.
Said Louisa, as she started smoking with Mary. Danny, Ethan, and Sue moved a few inches away, so not to have to inhale too much of the cigarette smoke.
Honestly, I really haven't.
Said Danny.
Didn't you go to the movies with your parents as a kid? Even once?
Asked Sue in an almost mocking way.
Ladies! Ease up on the poor guy. The Cinemania's been shut down for a long time.
Since when?
Danny immediately asked, now hooked on Ethan's every word.
Since 94 or 95, I think.
Ethan answered, as he stroked his red beard as he tried to remember the exact date.
Well, what happened to it?
Sue rolled her eyes to his question. It was obvious that of all of them, she was the one who was the most tired of hearing that story over and over again, but just kept silent as she crossed her arms, preparing to hear the story for the millionth time. Ethan, Mary, and Louisa looked at each other, silently debating who was going to finally spill the beans on the old movie complex, until both Louisa and Mary bobbed their heads at Ethan, implying that it should be him who told the story.
Well, like I said, the place closed down between 1994 to 1995, depending on who's telling the story.
It was the summer of 1994.
Chimed in Sue.
Right. Well, anyway, the movie place thought it'd be a fun idea to advertise a special on all horror movies that came out between 1984 to that year. The catch was, you had to pay for each movie. However, if you didn't leave the movie theater by closing time, you got your money back and free snacks for a month.
Danny's eyes lit up at the idea of having free snacks for a month, and all of your money back for each movie you were brave enough to see.
As you can imagine, this brings a big crowd, but there were only so many seats in that theater that was able to offer. So only the first 50 people were allowed to try it. They tried making it fair by giving a random person a chance every time someone in room 6, where the competition was being held, ran out screaming.
At this, Ethan laughed hard. Mary and Louisa laughed after. Danny chuckled a bit, but Sue only gave a smirk as she shook her head.
The competition seemed to be going well, and the theater was making a big profit from this every half hour that kept going on. The news picked up quickly by both the New York Times and Washington Post. There were shift changes between 5:30 and 6 o'clock p.m. Some news media swear that things were taking a turn for the worse. People were getting desperate to try to win to the point that they had to lock in whoever was in room 6 that very night. Janitorial staff were ordered to stay at the door in case the contestants needed to be let out of the room. And security wandered the halls just to make sure the competition didn't get out of hand. Supposedly,
Ethan said in air quotes,
that's when one of the janitors catch a bad feeling, like something wasn't right.
Ethan continued as it seemed like most of the group was eating up every word that he was saying, looking at him as if he had them on the edge of their seats.
One of the janitors on duty calls over a guard and asks him to go inside and see if everyone was okay. He said to the news reporter that he has never seen a guy go from dark to pale white in all his life.
Danny's eyes widened as his jaw dropped. The girls laughed at his reaction, but Ethan was more focused on finishing the rest of the now grim tale.
Wait, but then what happened?
Danny couldn't stop himself from asking.
Well,
There's 2 different endings to that story.
Sue cut in.
Truth is, no one really knows.
She continued as she shrugged her shoulders. Mary put out her cigarette as Danny asked,
What do you mean no one really knows? The security guard had to have seen something, right?
that's the problem.
said Ethan.
He just kept shouting that they were all dead, and someone for them to call them EMTs. They tried to get his side of the story hours after they got all 50 bodies out of there, but it didn't match with what the coroner wrote in his report.
Louisa put out her cigarette before continuing the story from where Ethan left off.
The coroner wrote their deaths as undetermined because he couldn't tell what truly killed them.
What the fuck?
Danny said in bewilderment.
Needless to say, it became one of New York's most unusual unsolved murders.
How? Didn't their bodies give any clues?
Danny said in a concerned but curious tone.
Depends if you're willing to believe that they all happen to have a knife on them, stab themselves once at the same time, and still have traces of carbon monoxide poisoning in their lungs.
Ethan said skeptically, seemingly unsure if he even believed it or not.
Not to mention how little amount of blood was found on their clothes and seats as well.
Said Mary in a serious tone of her own.
Jesus Christ.
Was all Danny could get out.
You think that's the only odd part? Some sick son of a bitch keeps making flyers for the cinema's grand reopening every year. But when people show up, they either disappear or find the place closed down and rotting away.
Sue couldn't stop from saying.
As far as we know, it's all just rumors. Though the last movie on display at this place is what gets me every time.
Ethan said with a small shiver.
What was it?
Danny asked. Ethan and the rest of the group tried to recall the name, but for some reason, they were stumped. That was, until it suddenly clicked for Louisa.
Oh, When the Grave Rises!
Yeah, that's the one.
Ethan said in agreement.
When the Grave Rises? I've never heard of it.
Said Danny, completely invested in the legend.
That's what makes it weirder. Neither the staff nor the owner of the cinema. The projecting guy just happened to find it and thought it was part of the lineup for the contest. He said he was so tired that night from doing 2 double shifts in a row that he didn't even think to question it.
Said Sue.
Didn't he say that he accidentally fell asleep in the projector room when it all happened?
Asked Louisa.
Yeah, I heard he's in the psych ward in upstate New York because of the overwhelming guilt.
Said Mary, as she leaned against Ethan.
Wait. What about the film? The cops didn't think to discover who dropped it off?
Danny spouted off.
First of all, you know the cops aren't going to do a damn thing.
Ethan said as he rolled his eyes, holding Mary close to him.
Secondly, the owner never thought to put security cameras anywhere in the theater, except where they kept the money at. So since the killer or killers didn't touch the safe, they didn't get a face.
Well, someone had to receive the film, right?
Danny asked with his arms crossed, not really sure if he believed them or not.
That's yet another weird part of the ongoing mystery. They searched from top to bottom, but they never found it, or figured out who directed it. No one had ever heard of the movie before that night, so it made the poor projector guy look even more guilty,
said Louisa, as she looked unsure as well as Danny did.
You guys are pulling my leg, right?
The group simply shook their heads.
No, the rumors might be fake, but the theater is very much real.
Sue spoke up after a moment of silence.
I still think it's worth checking out, though,
said Ethan with a smirk.
Count me out. Ain't no way I'm getting caught trespassing, or dealing with any rats that might be scurrying through that shithole.
The group chuckled at Sue's remark before Ethan pointed out that she might be fun and that they would stick together. After some time, Danny stated that he had to get home before his parents began to worry and complain about him being out too late.
You know what, Danny? You and I should check out this place out this weekend. See if this place really is haunted or dangerous as everyone says it is.
Ethan said, with the hope that they would all agree to go.
I don't know, man. My parents might lose it with me and tell me no,
said Danny, rubbing the back of his neck embarrassingly.
Oh my God, dude. How old are you? We're going to be seniors next year. Do something rebellious once in a while,
said a now aggravated Ethan.
I'll go if you guys are serious about this,
chimed in Mary.
Hell yeah,
Ethan said excitedly, hugging Mary tightly.
Fuck it, I'll go too then,
said Louisa.
What about you, Sue?
Ethan said, eagerly looking at Sue.
Can't. Sorry, I gotta work this weekend.
Most of the group groaned at this. Ethan turned to Danny and tried asking again.
All right. What time?
Danny said, feeling defeated. Ethan was the most excited for this. Unexpectedly, Danny tried to get Sue to cave in, asking if she could call off since this might be one of those rare moments that he could get away with it. Sue said that she didn't promise anything, but that she would try her best to go with them. It was then settled between them. They would all meet at the old theater around 8 p.m. on that particular Friday. Friday finally came around, leaving Danny feeling guilty for lying to his mom just to meet up with his friends. His own mother felt something wasn't right, but she still allowed him to go, knowing full well that she couldn't protect him forever. Louisa surprised everyone by revealing that Sue managed to get out of going to work. They were the first to arrive, and then it was Mary holding hands with Ethan and Danny right behind them. They all greeted each other as if they hadn't seen each other in years. The excitement of doing something they knew was wrong became a feeling of being high and invincible.
So, are we ready or not?
Sue said eagerly, going to one of the double-sided doors. Each door had a velvet cushion padding on the front of it that now had holes in it, exposing the cotton that was once stuffed in it. There were 2 double doors. One had a burnout LED light that said in cursive, "Entrance," while the other double doors on the left-hand side of the ticket booth had the standard exit sign hanging above it. Neither was lit up and looked like it hadn't been used in decades. The group fought over whether they should use the entrance or the exit to enter the theater. Danny had suggested to flip a coin, but Ethan came up with an idea that he thought was better.
The one who get through the door, they won first wins,
he suggested as he raced to break through the entrance door before the others had a chance to break through the exit doors. It was stupid, but they were having a blast when Danny rolled his eyes and chuckled to himself.
Come on, Danny. Team entrance all the way,
Ethan said as Mary and he were trying to break in.
No way. Team exit,
Sue said.
We're gonna get caught this way,
Danny said as he began to examine the ticket booth. There was no way to just slip in, no matter how thin he was compared to his friends. But he figured that maybe... And then his thought was interrupted by a phone call. It was his dad, calling to check on him because he had failed to tell them that he had supposedly gotten to Ethan safely.
Fuck.
was all he could say as he saw his father's number light up his screen.
Hey guys, let me take this call and then I'll help.
Danny shouted to them. Stubbornly, they didn't give up and barely heard him as he began to walk down to the nearest corner, hoping that his father wouldn't have followed him out there. They began to speak as Danny had to come up with lie after lie, hoping that his father wouldn't figure it out. In his mind, he was praying that his father wasn't smart enough to catch on to his lie and make him come home. Thankfully, the conversation was more about making sure Danny would call either his mom or him when they got there next time, to call when he was leaving, and to not do anything foolish. Of course, that included being home before curfew, but Danny did what any teen thinking they knew better would do. Just said yes and sorry over and over, hoping to be at the end of the conversation just to go back to their friends. Finally, Danny hung up after saying bye. He barely said I love you, just in case one of his friends were eavesdropping. The last thing he needed was to be picked on by his friends while exploring some old decrepit theater. He was heading back to see if they finally gave in when he felt a knot in his stomach and fear coursing through him, making him feel like what he was about to do was a big mistake. It made him hesitate, but he simply brushed it off as his parents were getting the better of him. After all, he didn't want to enter his senior year as the only one who didn't have some crazy story to tell, let alone go to college and feel like his life would only consist of books, lectures, sleep, and work. He just wanted one crazy story that he would tell years later. Maybe after finishing college, just to get his dad off his back. It took him a bit longer to get back to his friends because every muscle in his body ached for him to just go home. This wasn't worth it at all. Still, just like his friends, Danny was stubborn. He pushed through and didn't know what he was looking at as lights to the Cinemania lit up, no longer resembling its old, decrepit form. It looked like it had been open all day, and Danny wasn't sure what the hell was going on. He rubbed his eyes as he was still amazed by the lights of the theater. He thought about leaving when a random man dressed in a red and white striped suit and a big Western mustache called him from the ticket booth.
You doing okay, kid? You look lost.
Despite talking in a friendly manner to him, Danny was still left shocked and confused. He walked up to the mysterious man who gave off a soft smile and asked,
Have you seen my friends? There was one guy and 3 girls with him.
Danny didn't think his question through. He just thought he was getting played for a sucker and hoped that by going along, he would just get to the punchline. Maybe it was just a joke. They would laugh, and he would never speak about this again. The ticket booth man adjusted himself and said,
Yes, but I don't think you want to join them, young man. They look pretty determined to see the movie.
Just give me a ticket and let me see them. I don't find any of this to be funny.
Danny interrupted the man, believing that it was still some really sick joke. He wanted to punch Ethan in the arm, maybe swear a bit at his friends, and just go home. It didn't help that the man in the ticket booth sounded defeated when he said,
As you wish. Just don't say.
The I didn't warn you startled Danny a bit because it sounded like a machine powering down as he entered the theater through the entrance, but it didn't stop him from going in and looking for his friends. As he went in, Danny saw poster advertisements for movies he had never heard of. A few romantic comedies that looked like they would have flopped on opening day, a few action movies, and one particular horror movie that piqued his interest. When the Grave Rises. Danny ran down the hall, ignoring the faint smell of burnt popcorn and the sickening mildew smell that suddenly came from the carpet beneath his feet. It gave off the smell of wet dog fur, but Danny tried to hurry on. He was about to reach room 6 when the lights began to flicker on and off, and then suddenly shut off, leaving only the emergency red lights on. He couldn't lie to himself anymore. If this was some sort of prank, it really was a good and well thought out one. He was visibly scared and slowly walked to the door of room 6. He peeked in, but couldn't see anything. The only light that was on in the room was a big screen that looked as if it were playing a black and white movie. A part of him thought that this was the cliche of every horror movie. He would step in and find the killer waiting for him before or after he found his friends. The other part thought that he was just being stupid and needed to find his friends. He slowly opened the door that didn't make a sound. He walked in, but no longer could hear his footsteps. He thought that he would be able to hear the movie playing, but it didn't make a sound. He barely heard the projector in the room that was above him. Danny was now all alone in the dark. The only light that he would be able to use was from the big screen that no longer played the movie, but had a blue screen that every few seconds flipped to a white screen and then returned to blue. It took him only a minute, but he found Ethan, his head leaning to his right shoulder. Danny didn't want to look back in case the killer found him. He just wanted to see his friends for the last time, perhaps mourn for them before they were all dead. His other thought was still clinging to hope that this would be some sort of prank, but as he looked down the row, he saw it. They all had a knife wound in their chest where their heart should be. The only light he had was now gone, and the projector stopped. He tried shaking Ethan, trying to tell him to knock it off. This wasn't funny. Silence swallowed the room as the door locked behind him. The emergency doors were locked as well.
When the grave rises,
Danny heard someone say in a raspy tone. It sounded like it was in the row behind him. He slowly turned around and saw a pair of glowing red and yellow eyes all along multiple rows. He tried running down the center aisle, hoping to escape somewhere in the darkness, when he felt someone grab his wrist tightly.
No! No!
Danny shouted, struggling to get free from whatever had him. He got loose somehow and started pounding on the door, shouting for help, knowing that no one would help him. Still, he continued to try kicking and screaming as more eyes followed his every move. They moved closer to him, never uttering a sound, not a moan, not the sound of feet against the ground, not even the seats folding themselves up automatically. They just moved closer and closer, ignoring the projector beginning to replay the movie. The title of the movie displayed, and Danny screamed at the grotesque creatures that were now only a foot away from him. Their faces looked as if they hadn't slept in weeks, blood dripping down their one knife wound, as now they were inches away from Danny, who shut his eyes tightly and began to prepare for the end. All at once, they grabbed Danny. He tried to fight back, but he was overpowered. Now, he was forced to sit next to the corpse of Sue, a knife neatly placed in his hand. The longer the movie played, the more Danny had lost control of his body. The undead creatures forced him to watch the movie until he could no longer fight it. Danny tried to resist, but no longer could. He could hear someone coming into the theater room and slowly walked to the row behind him. Try as he might, he couldn't scream for the person to help him. He tried to stop watching the gore and carnage of the movie as tears streamed down his face, when he heard a man whispering into his right ear.
It didn't have to be this way, Danny. Your mother and I loved you. You were our only child. But in a world full of monsters, the weak-willed ones fall into the blade of their own making.
Danny felt a gentle kiss on the back of his head. I love you, Danny. We are so sorry to do this to you, his mother whispered into his left ear. Danny was only able to see the rows on either side of him and in front of him. He couldn't move his head, and saw the movie displaying his parents when they were younger. No, not his parents. His own grandparents. It had been them all along, and there was nothing that he could do now as he saw everyone, including his friends, pick up their knives into the air. He was horrified to see his own hand betray him as it joined them. And in one good plunge, it ended the movie and their lives. As Danny's parents got up and left, his grandpa shut off the movie projector. His grandmother began to sob into her husband. Danny's mother looked at Danny's father and asked, "What about his friends in room 5? He replied back as he escorted his wife out the door.
When the movie is over, the gas will take care of the rest. In the meantime, we need to get this place ready for next week's grand reopening. New York is full of souls ready to be lost."